Hi, my name is Anastasia Allen. I'm the Executive Director of Navigate STL Schools. Our guest today is Peter. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Staci. I am Peter Franzen. I'm the Associate Executive Director for the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri. We just call it CEAM. We go with the acronym.
Awesome. So we ask everybody this question. Tell us your personal K-12 story.
Well, I would say, my personal story is probably pretty common. I am a product of public education. I grew up mostly in Oregon on the West Coast and attended a traditional public school district, the Forest Grove Public Schools. I went to Neil Armstrong middle school and went to Forest Grove High School. And, I would say that overall it was a pretty good experience. And at the time, I think I enjoyed myself, and I feel like, more or less it prepared me for what was ahead for college, and that's what I did next. I think, looking back on it and knowing what I know now, I recognize that I also, like many other people, have a little bit of a Swiss cheese education. It has some holes in it. And I think that for a long time, I thought that I just maybe didn't have an aptitude for math. And I no longer think that that's true. I think that what happened was I was part of a system that, expects people to learn at the same rate and in the same way and at the same pace. And I missed something somewhere along the way. And when that happens, it's very hard to get caught up. But I think, because I presented as a bright young man, that maybe that was either overlooked or they just thought that I would catch up. But the truth is I didn't. And so that impacted the rest of my education. I managed somehow to get through geometry and I think even Algebra 1. But in the end, I did not excel in math, the way I did in language arts. And so, I don't know what it would be like to go back and change any of that. But that was definitely my experience.
So tell us about the work that you do and what inspires that work.
Well, I came to St. Louis in 1991 to do a year of volunteer work, or that's what I thought I was going to do. And it ended up being, a 30-year career working in, disenfranchised communities, working with low-income communities. And that work involved a lot of school-based programs. I ran the largest school-based mentoring program in the St. Louis public schools. And Staci, I don't know if you know this, but I came to St. Louis in 1991. I thought I was going to do 1 year of volunteer work and then head back home, but that's not what happened. I fell in love with the work, and I was working with low-income communities. I was working in communities of color. I was working in disenfranchised communities. And all of that profoundly changed my life. And it really opened my eyes to inequities that exist and, how different communities are treated differently. And so when I had the chance about 10 years ago to begin working with CEAM, I jumped at it because I really appreciated that what our organization is trying to do is create fundamental policy-based change. And that really, to my way of thinking, is where long-term change happens because the playing field is not level. I always tell people that, we have, or before this year, I would always tell people, we have school choice in Missouri, but it's reserved for people who can exercise that choice through mortgage, which means they buy a home or rent in the community where they think the schools are best for their kids, or they have choice through tuition. And to me, because they have the ability to pay, and to me, that's just fundamentally unfair. It's clear that certain families are able to exercise a choice, make a decision for their children because they know their kids and they know what's best for them and where they want them to be. But for many families, that's just not even something that they can consider. So when I found out about the work of CEAM and what the organization was trying to do, which is basically, support policies and innovations that ensure families have the right to choose the education that best meets the needs of their child, I immediately gravitated toward it because I just saw in that is the kind of fight that I wanted to be a part of. And, my decision to begin working with CEAM was really quickly validated when I began, meeting so many parents all around the state in the St. Louis area, and in a whole new way really began to understand the challenges that families are facing when it comes to education. And so our organization works across the state with all sorts of communities in urban and rural settings. And we really, I think, put a face on policy that needs to be there because legislators are making decisions in Jefferson City based on who speaks up. And so we've all heard the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But for many families, advocating for themselves, going to Jefferson City, testifying before committee is a foreign concept. And CEAM provides the resources and the expertise and the knowledge and the training to help parents put their best foot forward, tell their stories in the most effective way. And I think that has really led us to where we are today and why we've seen these improvements with virtual ed and now the new ESA law. So it's, to me, it's one of the most powerful things that I've done in my career.
That is amazing. You really just hit the nail on the head when you talked about like the access to advocacy for parents. As you think about that and the work that you've done with CEAM, what do you think is one of the greatest challenges that's actually facing education in the city of St. Louis currently?
Oh man, if I knew that, I would be rich. If I really knew the challenges are many, and we see it played out in so many different ways. There is something wrong with education today, K12. There's something wrong, and I can't tell you exactly what it is. I've been in and around public schools for much of my career, and I've seen them in action. I've seen what I believe to be good schools and how they connect with parents and how those classrooms look. And I've also been in low-performing schools and wondered to myself if we just can't do better. It really seems like we want to blame families, and I just don't see it that way. I think we have really well-educated, trained professionals who, in my mind, there's got to be a way to do this. And I know it's possible when I look at situations where, say, we have a traditional public school and we know the results there, and then down the street serving the same community, we have an alternative school, like, say, a charter public school with dramatically different numbers in terms of student performance. And I have to ask myself, what is that school doing so differently that they can draw from the same community and come up with these better results? And so we really have to look at education across the board and not, I think, get caught up with the idea that there's only, one right way to do it, because across all the different ways that kids get educated, from non-public schools to traditional public schools to charter schools to homeschooling to online education to micro schools, across the board there are you can find success stories. And so I think looking at those success stories, understanding what people are doing right, is really what we need to be doing. I'm not here, and in my career, I'm not here when I show up in Jefferson City to blame people. I just know that this is urgent, and I know that we've got to figure out a way to get kids into the right environment where they can learn, where they do feel affirmed, where they do feel valued, so that we're not stuck in the end. This is, a pay me now or pay me later proposition. We either now figure this thing out, or down the road, we are going to just continue to suffer with young people not getting the education they deserve. And that has an impact on all of us.
So you mentioned homeschooling earlier. Does CEAM support homeschool families?
Well, broadly, we support parents choosing the educational environment that works for their kid. So I would not pretend to be an expert on homeschooling, but I've seen that work for many families. I've seen for a number of reasons why parents might choose to homeschool their kids. And it can work, and it can be really great. And I know people who do that. They like working at their pace. They like having the day to be scheduled to meet the needs of the kid. They like for their child to be able to, get up and have some free time and recess in between, subjects, or they like to be able to spend extra time helping their child on a challenging topic. So I know it's not possible for every family to homeschool, and I don't think every family wants to homeschool, but I think for families that it does make sense for them, and where the parents have the wherewithal to do it, and the interest and the access to the resources that they need, I think it's fine.
So as I kind of think about homeschool and think about what you said in terms of just parents being active in terms of their kids' education, I know that you guys have recently done a lot of work in Jefferson City around ESAs, correct?
Yes. It's really
what is an ESA as for people who are just getting introduced to the concept?
Well, the work is really the culmination of people long before I got involved, more than 10 years ago, people for decades who have wanted to give parents the power to choose. What we have helped pass, along with many parent advocates around the state, legislators, community leaders, people came and testified and have been for many years. What we've helped create is something called the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. And that program will help, in its current form, will help low-income kids and kids with IEPs, individualized education plans. It will give them access to this scholarship fund. And so their families will apply to this scholarship fund and can receive $6,375. And that specific number reflects what's called the state adequacy target. It is the state contribution to education, basically. And so it's extremely flexible, the scholarship. So a family could choose to use that for tuition, for example. And what Missouri has done is created a very flexible ESA, and really, I think, a model for the country. The ESA that we've created allows families to use it at a traditional public school district if they want to cross district boundaries. They can use it at a charter public school, or they could use it for tuition at a private school. Beyond that, homeschooling families could use that to access the curriculum and tutoring services that they might need. It can be used for certain therapies, say for a child with autism. So it's really a game changer, I think, for many families. Now, it just got passed this past legislative session. The governor signed it into law on July 14th. It went into effect officially on August 28th. However, we're now looking at the program will be run out of the state treasurer's office. So there's going to be, as with any law, a period of rulemaking where they try to kind of create the administrative structure around the program. And the treasurer's office has hired a program director to run that, to run the new ESA program. So the thing about it is that people need to understand is that we do need to raise money for the scholarship fund. It is a tax credit funded program. So that means that a person or a company could donate to the scholarship fund, and in return from the state, they would get a tax credit. It's a 100% tax credit, meaning if you donate $5,000, you get a $5,000 tax credit that goes against your tax liability for that year, up to 50% of your state tax liability. So you can't if you owe $5,000 to the state, you could donate $2,500 and get that $2,500 as a tax credit, which is deducted from your state tax liability, if that makes sense. So up to half of what you owe the state, but the donation is 100%. So that's the new ESA. It's all happening, in real time. And, we're excited about the rulemaking process and rolling out of the program. And it's our hope that maybe as early as fall of 2022, that the first families will receive scholarship support for their kids. So it's very exciting. It's a real game changer, in my opinion.
So you're talking about it being a game changer. What do you see as the biggest potential benefits for families?
It will give families, since the program is intended to serve low-income families and students with special needs, it will give them a whole new menu of options that they may not previously have been able to access. And so I think for the families that use the ESA, that for that child, it has the potential to really put that kid in an environment that works for them, where they're going to be able to learn and learn well, and it's going to meet their needs. So I think that is exciting. I think the other reason it's a game changer, even though the program is starting off relatively small, and by small, I mean the scholarship fund, the tax credits will max out at $25 million. But at the 6375 amount that I mentioned, that'll serve about 4,000 kids. But so even though it's relatively small compared to the million students in K12 students in Missouri, I think it's a game changer because, to my way of thinking, it means that families are not, obligated to accept what their government, what they're being told they need to do. So it means that if you live in a neighborhood and you're told that your child has to attend this severely underperforming school, that is not necessarily so, that you'll have an option. And what it means, I think, for education overall is that traditional public school districts, as we move forward, will no longer be able to just take their student enrollment for granted. And I do think that's part of the problem, that families have no choice. Many families have no choice. They have to go to that school. The school receives money from the state based on the number of students who are there, not based on the number of students who excel. And I think that for that reason, it's a game changer for the whole K-12 system, because families have a voice and will have the ability to walk away from a failing situation to do better by their kids. And I know that they are embracing that already.
So a lot of what we do at Navigate STL Schools is work around empowering parents in their voice in the education process. When you're considering the work that you do and how it can benefit families, it's a wild thing to say, but we live in St. Louis where education is a hot button topic. What are some of the pushbacks or challenges that you all receive from the type of work that you do, particularly when you're doing kind of state level advocacy in terms of education and elevating parent voice?
Sometimes it's really it's crazy sometimes, Staci. We live now in this really siloed information age, and people are in these feedback loops where they keep hearing the same information that they already agree with, and so they begin to believe things that are patently false. In our work, for example, there are people who just out of hand won't listen to anything that I have to say and simply believe that I am part of some huge conspiracy, some crazy right-wing conspiracy to privatize education, that I am somehow this free market mastermind who just wants to ruin traditional public schools. And that could not be further from the truth for me personally, or for our organization. And I think for the education reform movement in general, and it is certainly not true of parents who want to exercise choice, because who does not want to do right by their child? That to me is just crazy. Why, who wants to sacrifice their kid to a severely underperforming school where 17% of the kids are proficient in English language arts and 12% are proficient in math? Nobody wants to do that. And a lot of the people who disparage the work or subscribe to these crazy conspiracies, I think are sitting back in a comfortable place, or their kids have already graduated, or their kids are in a private school doing what they want to do, but somehow want to tell us that what we're doing on behalf of parents, and that even the parents, that somehow we've duped parents into speaking up for themselves. And I can assure you that all the parents I know do not need to be duped into speaking up for themselves. They are waking up to the fact that there is this inequity around them, and why shouldn't they be able to make a choice? Families don't walk away from high-functioning schools that are serving the needs of their kids. Great. If that's your situation, you don't need an option. You've got the option you want. But don't tell people whose kids are being bullied, whose child is in a classroom with a teacher who maybe shouldn't be teaching, or in a school that you wonder how it's even functioning. Don't tell them that they have to sit there and sit tight while somehow we fix the system. Because people have been trying to fix the system for a very long time, and it doesn't seem like it's working. So to me, just from a really practical standpoint, letting people get out is sane and makes sense. And that's the reason I do it. Not because I have some kind of nefarious political agenda. It's because I want kids to learn. I want them to be in an environment where they feel empowered and loved and cared about, and that's working for them. So let a parent go find that. And I don't know how else to say it.
No, you said a lot. You mentioned education reform. What do you think education reform could even look like in St. Louis City or in the region?
Well, I wish that first we could agree to put kids first. I choose kids over institutions. I understand. I get it. I get that traditional public education is a beloved institution, and that some people will tell me, well, public education is the cornerstone of our democracy. And I say, well, no, that's not true. A well-educated citizenry is the cornerstone of our democracy. So I don't choose, institutions of any sort, over kids. So I want quality choices, whether it's a traditional public school district or a charter school or a virtual school. I want families to, have good choices. And I think we need to stop feeling so threatened and not buy into conspiracy ideas, and just sort of look toward the future with fresh eyes. And what should education really look like? And, what options should parents have? The truth is, in my opinion, the truth is that this law passed this year in part due to the pandemic, because for the first time across the state, families got a very up-close personal experience with their school district that they may never have had. And it seems like in many cases, they didn't deliver. And it really woke a lot of parents up. And so new advocates came our way, parents for the first time who maybe thought their kid was doing okay, but now they were suddenly more engaged and the child was home learning, and they were shocked by what they saw. And so I think that it really, helped fuel the fire in the belly of parents to ask for change.
Oh no, continue.
Well, so education, I think education reform means, putting kids first and then building an educational structure around kids that, will meet their needs. We are in an environment where we are recognizing that kids learn differently, that they have different needs. And, I get it. I mean, there's a limit, but we also have so many options that you can likely find a scenario where a kid can learn if it's not being offered to you. And so I just think we need to take a breath and not assume that people are out to get us. Teachers, there's always going to be jobs for teachers because kids need to be taught. So we should stop thinking that the only place for teachers is in a traditional public school district, because we know that there are quality teachers in charter schools and high quality teachers in private schools and in online schools. And so teachers are needed. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I made sense in any.
No, I love that. Kids over institutions and parents making choices that value their kid as a person. When you think about that framework, what do you think are maybe the three biggest things that parents should consider when they're selecting a school for their child?
Well, parents, of course, know their kids better than anyone. And so if there's a physical building involved, so if you're choosing an actual school building, I think visiting the school, looking around at the school environment, because that can tell you a lot. As I said, I've been in many, many, many school buildings, and, even in low income communities, I've walked into school buildings that were neat, clean, student artwork and student work on the walls neatly displayed. Classrooms were organized. Kids were paying attention and learning. And so I think, you want to look for that environment where it feels like kids are learning. And then I think the second thing you want to do is that there is a lot of publicly available information through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, albeit through a somewhat heinous, online portal where it's very hard to find it, but it can be found, and organizations like CEAM and others try to get that information out and interpret it for parents. But understand how that school is performing, how students there are performing, and I think I mentioned this, but I go back to meet the classroom teachers and the school leadership, and just you want to get a sense for that environment and what that school is about. It could be that a really high functioning school that checks all those boxes, but you could still end up having the feeling that maybe that's not quite the right environment. Maybe it's a school that focuses on the arts, but you want your child or your child wants to be learning about STEM or both, or some other kind of config. So I say you have to ask questions, take your checklist with you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid of school leadership or classroom teachers. They are there to answer your questions. And I just don't be intimidated. As a parent, you have a right to ask those questions.
So in all the time that you have been doing this work and through everything that you've seen, what really gives you hope about the future of education in the city of St. Louis?
There are so many success stories. I mean, we get caught up, of course, in some of the negative press that's out there. But there are kids learning. There are, great schools out there where a lot of the kids learn. So it gives me hope, because we have, for the first time, we're seeing more and more different kinds of schools. And we are, I think, legislators and community leaders are going into those schools and learning about them and understanding, what's happening. So, it gives me hope that there are these great successes where kids are doing fantastic and going on to college or going on to trade school or going on to meaningful work in their lives. And so we shouldn't forget that. It's easy to dwell on the negative. It's easy to, wring our hands and just feel like the world is just, going to heck. And maybe sometimes it does feel like that, but, when we need to celebrate the successes of students and programs and educators and school leaders, because there are so many good people out there doing good work, and we don't want to just overlook that.
Awesome. So my last question is, with the work that organizations like CEAM and Navigate STL Schools and Bridge to Hope and other parent organizations are doing in this field, What is the one thing that you really want parents who are in the process of navigating the St. Louis schools today to know or understand?
That they have choices. I want them to know that CEAM and other organizations are working hard to give them access to more options, and to and to exercise that. It's asking a lot. I mean, I do get that. It's asking a lot of parents. It would be great if all of our schools were perfect and you didn't have to give it a second thought, and you just send your kid to the school and you know that they're going to be loved and educated. But that's just not the situation. And so I know it's asking a lot, but seeing parents really, I'm humbled by the parents I know, because many of the parents I know are in challenging family situations. Maybe don't have the means that other people do. But what I do know is that they love their kids and they want what's best for their kids. And I'm humbled by their willingness to advocate for their children and for other children, to join us in Jefferson City to go and testify and to talk and connect with their legislators, to be active. And that to me is amazing. And so I don't know if that really answered your question, but
No,
that's
it
what I
answered
wanted to
it
end with.
perfect. Parents have choices, and their choices matter. Thank you so much, Peter, for your time today and for having a conversation with us. It's been great talking to you.
Staci, I love what you guys are doing at Navigate. It's so important, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
All right.